All right, all right, all right. Aloha Friday, everybody. Welcome to this edition. Thank you for being with us today as we are going to be speaking to Angela Harris. She's a leadership coach and helping not only just Black women, but women in general in tech strategically navigate the corporate landscape. And I am so happy to have her with us as we are going to be talking about the importance of diversity and inclusion in the tech industry, especially when it comes to the BIPOC community. Angela, thank you for being with us today on Aloha Friday Live.
Thank you so much for having me here today. And I was enjoying the view of Waikiki Beach. I spent my birthday there back in November of 2022, so I was enjoying that refresher.
Oh, hey, I tell you that there's no place like Hawaii, especially as
Absolutely.
an actual state in our union. If you have not been there, I'm not gonna say shame on you, but please try to go and
At
enjoy
least
what
once.
we have as paradise. I was communicating earlier that I spent a good 13 years of my life on Oahu, enjoying that. So I'm thankful every day for that experience. But folks, today we're going to be talking about the tech industry and how the tech industry is being influenced by who is in it, right? And a lot of times, as I was telling Angela, I come from the STEM field, and I didn't see too many like me, right, in the beginning. It was later on that I started seeing, but you're talking about a 30-year span of time for it to be impacted in any way that would make a significant contribution to my community. So, as we're talking about the importance of diversity and inclusion in the tech industry, Angela, tell us a little bit about you and how you got into tech.
Well, I got into tech by going to college, but my first exposure to tech was probably about age 6. I remember I was out with one of my aunts. It was like a Saturday afternoon, and we were in a store. And you're going out by aisle. And I don't know if I knew it was a computer, but I saw this machine, and I was just so fascinated by this machine. So I'm that kid, pressing buttons, not knowing what I'm doing. So fast forward to age 9, I don't know what I was telling my father or what my father saw in me, but my father purchased my first computer for me when I was 9 years old. My first computer was a Commodore 64. And when I was a child, the STEM acronym had not been invented. There was no formal computer science education in my school. So I was simply teaching myself how to do things on my home computer. But I knew that I was fascinated by technology and that I wanted to attend college and study technology. And I went to Drexel University in Philadelphia, and I graduated with my degree in information systems. And that was my start into my career in technology.
Now that's wonderful. And we had before the show we were discussing on the importance of parents and how that can actually influence the trajectory of the children
Mhm.
going forward. And it's so important as parents that you just highlighted there to notice what your kids have interest in. And although not too many people had computers, right?
No,
uh,
I was the only one in my grade or my school that had a home computer, because my friends, they had like Sega and Nintendo, but I was like, I guess, the geek, because I was going home and doing things on my computer.
Yeah, no, and that's also an important part of how we allow our kids to develop what we introduce into them, right? They could have easily switched the Sega or Nintendo for a
Mhm.
computer, but they chose the other side. And gaming has its place, right?
Yeah,
That is part of tech.
that's
Um,
the industry.
yeah, that is an industry, but it is important for parents to take note of your children's interest. Eat early, right? Because
Mhm.
it's early where we get those little impulses of, man, I really want to look into that. My son, uh, you know, 13, wants to own his own gaming company, and
Wow.
I'm like, bet, let's do it. So what
Yeah.
do? I'm scheduling a tour at EA Sports out here in Orlando. Right?
Nice.
So these are the things, right? Not to toot my horn. I'm just one parent. There are other parents out there doing the same, and good on you. But it is the parents' responsibility to notice those things. And so, good of your father to see that spark. Good of you to continue to explore what was not a thing, right? You mentioned STEM wasn't even a thing yet, right?
Mhm.
And as we're talking about, um, discovering passions and goals, what can you elaborate on your motivations and what drives you for your passion for technology?
Honestly, I think I just think back to that 6-year-old girl, just seeing a computer. I've always just been fascinated by technology, so I'm always the person that's going to gravitate towards the tech solution and finding a way to use technology in anything that I do. So that's just where it comes from. I really can't put a pin on it, but that's really what it is. And also, I've just been very focused on educating myself. I'm a lifelong learner, so I love to learn new things. So that curiosity about learning also fuels me.
And so, as we're highlighting the parent role, um, what would you suggest some parents to think about when that child is curious, right? That child is thinking, "Oh, I would like to be in this science or technology or in engineering or mathematics kind of
Yeah.
environment."
Yeah. Similar to what you said with what you're doing with your son, definitely nurture that, build on that. If you aren't familiar with that particular area that your child is interested in, ask questions, get curious. There's so many programs out there that are available now that weren't there when I was a child. So make sure they have exposure to the right organizations to help grow and develop and nurture that talent or that interest that they have.
And you bring up a good point. I like to transition into that, which is accessing resources and
Mhm.
support. There are so many resources, organizations right now that both you and I did not see growing up.
Yes.
There were none because they just weren't there for us. I mean, that's just how you got to say it.
Mhm.
So, can you discuss the support systems available for Black women entering the tech industry now?
Well, there are a ton of organizations. One organization that's very near and dear to my heart is the Information Technology Senior Management Forum, or ITSMF for short. And I was exposed to that organization back in 2018. I had the pleasure of going through a leadership development program that they offer called Emerge Academy. And what's unique about this program is that it's specifically for women of color in the tech industry. And the goal is to help elevate more women to leadership roles within tech. And I've worked in corporate for over 20 years, and I've seen tons of women's leadership development programs, but nothing specific to women of color and women of color in tech. So the program is it's a 9-month program now, but when I went through it was a year-long program. It included access to an executive coach. We had various exercises or meetings that we would do once a quarter. So basically, I had all the support in the community that I needed to help build my career and honestly build my confidence as well.
And I love those communities, those organizations that focus on bringing in the BIPOC community
Yes.
into what we're seeing now, right? I come from the meteorology and oceanography community. I mentioned earlier there was not many of me, and it was nice to see that develop throughout the years, and them do something about the diversity within that community.
Mhm.
But we all have faced challenges. I know I faced my challenges early on. Were there any challenges you faced while you was trying to access all these resources, and how'd you overcome them?
Yeah, absolutely. I could walk you through like my entire, corporate career and talk to you about challenge after challenge. My first job in the tech space, I was a sophomore in college. I went to Drexel University and we do co-op. So the very unique thing about that is we work for 6 months out of the year. So you're gaining real world experience as a college student. So you graduate with 18 months of work experience. And so I'm a sophomore in college, I'm going for my interviews for my very first, job in the tech field. And I'm just so excited to start, digging in and earning money and learning more about my field. I remember going on an interview for a network engineer position in the network operations center of Roman Haas Chemical Company in Philadelphia. And the hiring manager told me that they never had any women work in this department and he wanted to hire 2 female co-op students. And this was 1998. Again, I'm a sophomore in college. What he said to me just really went over my head at the time. So I didn't realize that I was going to be one of the first women and the first Black woman to work in that department as a sophomore in college. And that was like a trend for the majority of my career. I was always the first woman or the only woman or the only Black woman on the team for much of my career. And I guess other obstacles would be not having mentors. Tech is a male-dominated field, so very early in my career, I didn't have mentors as I was trying to navigate some of those challenging situations. I had to figure out what I thought was best to do at the time. And also not having supportive managers that were interested in nurturing and growing my career and trying to help me get to that next level.
That is so important to know. It's great to be the first. I thank God that I was the first at many things,
Mm-hmm.
but being the first and being the only, that's a hard road. It's a
Yeah,
hard
it
road
comes a
because
lot of weight and pressure.
not only the weight and pressure, but you're there alone,
Yeah,
and sometimes with no one to sponsor you
absolutely. I
because
didn't have
they just never
sponsors.
seen somebody like
Yeah,
you.
right, right.
Yeah, when I went to boot camp, I remember this young man said, "I've never seen a Puerto Rican," and I was like, "Man, we've been a part of the states for a long time."
Uh-huh.
And so it brings its own set of challenges, and even with achieving something like that, getting to the first of this and that, it also becomes a new plateau of loneliness because there are none like you to kind of like give you the
Mhm.
road. And
Yeah.
as we're talking about that kind of scenario, um we bring different perspectives than other people, right? So how do we leverage that unique perspective that we bring from our cultures and our backgrounds and our upbringings? It's very important. So what were your experiences as a Black woman in the tech industry? How was your perspectives um greeted?
Sometimes they weren't greeted. And I've been in situations where I may have made recommendations to stakeholders and they would literally roll their eyes, suck their teeth, and huff and puff at me because they didn't like what I was saying, although it was the right thing to say, because it was coming from me as a Black woman. It wasn't well received.
Mm.
But if colleagues, white male colleagues would have said the same thing, it's okay for them to say it. But coming from a Black woman, it wasn't well received. And I remember one particular incident. This group of stakeholders, again, they would literally huff and puff, roll their eyes, suck their teeth at me in meetings. They went and complained to my leadership saying I wasn't supporting them.
Wow. Yeah, and look, I understand because I've been there myself. Um, it it's just it's still there, and I see Shelly. Shelly says, "Been there," right? And it still happens. And
Yeah.
I want to take this time as I put Shelly's comment up. Thank you so much for all those that are joining us already. I see on Shelly, Jane. Thank you, Jane, my sister from the military community. Uh, Marjana is also there. And so many others. So thank you. Thank you for joining us on this Aloha Friday Live as we're discussing the importance of diversity in the tech community, especially from the BIPOC community. And it's so important to highlight these things because they are still occurring.
Yeah.
When I came in the first 3 years, uh, there was nobody like me. Yeah, I was in a white room. That's
Mhm.
all it was. It
Yeah.
was a community that didn't have too much representation from any other than Caucasian. So Now there were some Asians. There are probably more Asians than anything. But look,
Mhm.
when I was in high school, I was in a sports high school. Right next to it was what they call in the Bronx High School of Science. All you saw was were probably three ethnicities. It
Mhm.
was white, Asian, and Indian.
Okay.
I did not see African American. I did not see Hispanic. We were on the other side.
Wow.
And it was a straight divide, two schools right next to each other. And I remember vividly being on the track, because it was a sports high school, and looking at the fence on the other side and seeing that they didn't have the same that we had.
Mhm.
And I see that still in my head, right? So and this is, back in 19, well, close to 90,
Mhm.
in the late 80s, early 90s. And some communities still look that way. And when we're talking about perspectives, right? The perspective that you gave, you were actually contributing to the conversations, to the explorations of thoughts and things, but it wasn't well received. So how did those moments make you feel as a professional? Because that's really important.
Mhm.
You continued, but I'm
Mhm.
sure they brought up some
Yeah,
feelings.
it was frustrating. It was very frustrating. And then I remember when my manager, got the email that Angela isn't supporting us, my manager basically told me to grin and bear, basically to kind of deal
Mm,
with it because he didn't want it to escalate even further. So I got no support from my management in that situation either.
that's roll with the punches, huh?
Yeah, pretty much.
roll, roll with the punches. And I've heard it myself in once or twice, if not more. To hey, this is the community is not ready. We're opening up, right? Because
Mhm.
this higher directive of that we have to open up, or
Mhm.
else I tell you, if there were no policies or no laws that were enacted,
Mm.
eh, we would probably be seeing the same thing we saw when we was growing up.
Mm.
But because legislature has been passed, now you have to do this, but it doesn't mean that we have to like it. And that's
Right, right.
usually
But now we're seeing that same legislation being rolled back.
that. And I wonder why. I wonder why. Uh, you know, uh, and so let's talk a little bit about that because it has come up. Um, the rescinding, the taking back of
Mhm.
diversity and inclusion efforts. Um, if you asked me at the beginning when it all started rolling out, I was viewing it as this is just another mandated thing that
Mhm.
now they have to swallow. And by
Mhm.
they, I'm talking about organizations at large
Yeah.
that organizations have to swallow, and they're gonna throw a dime at it, right? Because they're not gonna throw any substantial amount of money on it. Uh, they're gonna throw a dime at it. They're gonna pick somebody that fits that bill, right? Oh, you want diversity, so we're gonna have the local or more accessible BIPOC representative to run that, and there
Mhm.
check in the box, and that's how
Mhm.
I saw it. And sure enough, not everybody took that stance, but for the most part it was just another check in the box.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so now we're seeing companies saying we cutting that out. What are we going to do now? What are we going to do now?
Well, my thing with that is, were they even measuring anything? Because I'm just taking it from a perspective of the tech industry. The
Right.
number of Black women in tech has remained flat for years. It's been at 3% for many years. And actually now it's dipped to 2.2%. in the midst of all these diversity efforts. So you weren't able to increase your numbers, and now they have decreased, and you're not doing anything about it. And there's data that says 56% of mid-career women in the tech industry are leaving. So my question is, I don't think there was ever any accountability when those companies started making those promises years and years ago, because they would say, okay, we're going to meet this target by 2019. 2019 will come. Okay, now the date has moved again to 2022. So there was never any accountability for what they were promising, because they never delivered on what they were promising.
And that's a huge point. You know, folks, if a program is enacted and it's not tracked, or you're going to see a decrease, because what's going to happen is that you've just taken the way things were and you put it in a different package.
Yeah, you putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. And if you look at it from like a sports analogy perspective, like losing coaches are fired. Everybody wants to win a championship. They don't view this as trying to win a championship.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of those faces pop up on my feed about this coach got this and this coach got that, and it's no wonder that you had a dip, right? Mm-hmm. That alone should tell you that things were not right.
They were never right, but again, they weren't trying to fix the structural issues of the problem. Then we add on the pandemic to that, and then the mass layoffs that we've seen over the last 2 years. And we know that women and minorities are overrepresented in some of those lower wage jobs or lower level jobs. That's why we've seen that dip. And we're also dealing with, pay equity issues. Black women, it will take over 100 years for Black women to reach pay equity in the United States. So until those issues are addressed, we're never going to see any real progress.
And so I wanted to ask, so I mean, there's always going to be a negative side to anything, any initiative. Yeah, we can see through it, right? You don't have to sell us. We already know, because you put this program out there, but we see and we hear what's actually going on. There are no real support systems for them. They never intended to support those things. It was just, and that's what all it is, right? And so we can see that. You don't have to sell us a bill of goods. We already know. But there have been instances, and I can recall, where for whatever reason at the current time, my perspective was received. And they took it, and something happened. So can you share maybe an example of an instance where your perspective did add value to a project or an initiative, and you was like, okay, this is what it's supposed to look like?
I think back to an occasion, I was working for an insurance company, and I was supporting their disaster recovery efforts. So basically, if a major disaster were to impact this organization, how could they keep functioning from a technological perspective? So I was in charge of coordinating their annual disaster recovery test. And during our test exercise, we learned that one of our key servers for one of our claims processing applications could not be recovered within the required time frame to support sustainability of the business. And I had to share this with our senior level leadership. And thankfully, in that instance, they actually were receptive to what I was saying, again, because it was a critical component of the business. And as a result of that, disaster recovery became a performance goal for everyone within that respective department, because they wanted to ensure that if something were to happen to the business, that we were able to fully recover from it.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Yeah, they know when. They know when.
When money is affected, right? I mean, money was on the line at that point.
Yeah, and typically when money's is the thing, the object, then all ears,
all
right?
hands
all
on deck.
ears. Yeah, that's right. And but thankfully they did, and you saw a positive impact from your suggestion, and that's always good to see. There are been many times that I've been afforded that opportunity, have been able to contribute, and did see something positive come out from that. And so I'm grateful for those moments as well. Now,
Mhm.
we spoke earlier, and given your educational background, right? You started with a first. Man, what is that? I want to see that, right? I want to work with that. To getting your education and then going into employment, but
Yeah.
acquiring skills and knowledge is very important, especially in the tech, because this is where
Mhm.
you talk about the brains get together to make things happen. So for a person that comes from our neighborhoods, right? A
Mhm.
person that comes from our upbringings, what practical steps did you take to acquire the necessary skills and knowledge for your tech career?
Mhm. Well, outside of, going to college, just really being that lifelong learner, if there were books or, magazines or workshops, things of that nature, I just always make sure I take advantage of it. And leaning on the expertise of mentors and just really being an advocate for myself. I think I shared that I didn't have supportive managers in my career. So always just taking my career into my own hands and just like if someone told me no, that just motivated me to find that one person that would say yes to me. So just always just being curious and being that lifelong learner because as you said, tech is constantly evolving. So you have to stay on top of the trends.
And what advice would you give, the BIPOC community, if they're starting out into this, into exploring
Yeah.
tech, advice or tips for aspiring tech industry leaders
Mhm.
or participants?
Mhm. Yeah, I would say don't be afraid of it. And honestly, you really want to make sure that you have some level of comfort with technology, especially with the rise in artificial intelligence right now. It's really going to reshape and reimagine a lot of jobs because of the automation. A lot of jobs are going to not necessarily go away, but certain tasks are going to be automated. So you want to make sure that you have some level of familiarity with technology and in particular AI so that you can still remain relevant. And honestly, as it relates to the wealth gap, that's going to create a lot of jobs and opportunities for people. So you want to make sure that you have exposure to that.
And exposure in many ways, right?
Mhm,
You mentioned you went to, as a lifelong learner, you went to these events, you went
mhm,
to these conferences and things. So I wanted to ask in terms of conferences, 'cause, I live in Orlando. There's conferences for everything.
mhm,
You
mhm.
name it, we got it. And
Yeah.
so how impactful were, you attending those conferences, those training events?
Mhm.
How impactful was that, and how beneficial was that for you as you was going through this
Yeah.
journey of learning?
Well, to be honest, I feel like my first conference didn't come at least till maybe almost 20 years in my career. Again, didn't really have
Wow.
that supportive management. So I think the first time I attended a conference that was company funded was probably 2018 when I started going through the leadership program with ITSMF. Up until that time, I was always taking advantage of the internal learning opportunities that my companies offer. So they had a learning and development organization that would put on internal trainings, or if they had what is it, the online learning classes you could take, I would always take advantage of things that way. But now, things are different. I mean, we're on LinkedIn Live, so depending on the type of LinkedIn account, you can go through learning classes on LinkedIn Live to educate yourself on anything from project management to AI. And then if you go to Eventbrite, there's tons of workshops available, some low cost, no cost on Eventbrite. So there are tons of opportunities to gain exposure to these skills.
I love that you bring up Eventbrite, but also the fact that on LinkedIn, right, we're streaming live on LinkedIn. There's based on your paid or not paid, right?
Yeah.
You could actually get some training there. Technology has facilitated a lot. I mean, you go on YouTube. I'm fixing
Yeah,
my
YouTube
car
as
right
well.
now.
YouTube University.
I'm fixing my car right now via YouTube, right? And I don't suggest that for everybody, but it's my car and I want to do it. But technology has facilitated a lot of independent learning
Yeah.
where you can get at least up to par on your own trying to get develop until you can get into a position where maybe you can take an exam,
Yeah.
maybe you can get entry into a course or whatnot. But you bring up a good point. There's a lot of uh if not low cost, definitely some that are free
Yeah.
for you to
Yeah.
just sit and learn. There are a lot of LinkedIn Live, the audio version, where you can look at all the different events that are happening and get in there and just listen. Or
Yes.
maybe you get an opportunity to contribute, and that's okay. But these are different ways where you could explore that future learning part for yourself without coming out of cost, and
Mhm.
maybe not having to commit financially to this. Folks, the education is out there,
Yeah, you just have
and you can.
to ask for it. And what I just want to piggyback on what you said about LinkedIn. A lot of the LinkedIn learning classes, well, some of them will offer or certificate components. So you might have to pay a couple of extra dollars, but you can once you complete the series of classes, you can get a certificate that says you're certified in project management or you're certified in business analysis. So there are certifications that you can gain by doing the LinkedIn learning classes.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned something earlier that I like to focus on right now, and that is the component of the networking, and then the component of advancement
Yeah.
within the structure of your community. It looks different for everyone, so you would have to, do some homework as to how you're going to advance and by what means. But you mentioned mentors earlier,
Mhm.
so let's talk about the role of mentors in the tech community, and I'll explore some other because there are some things like sponsors and things
Yes.
of that nature. But let's
Yeah.
focus on mentor. How did you get a mentor? Have you been a mentor, and how has that worked for
Mhm.
the tech community that you're in?
Sadly, again, very early in my career, I did not have mentors. Again, I was always or usually the first or only woman on the team. So how do you build those relationships with your male colleagues? And then honestly, no one was ever really taking me under their wing anyway. So didn't really have mentorship very early in my career. But as I started moving around in my career, because I had navigated some of those unsupportive situations and environments, I started mentoring. I don't know if I knew it was mentoring at the time, but I would just start having conversations with other women in my organizations or younger girls and just kind of, sharing my experiences with them so that they can learn from it. And also they would have support if they needed it. So again, started informally mentoring just out of my experience of not having a mentor. And I think my first real true mentor that actually really took an interest in me, I met her back in 2014. And I met her when she was the interim CIO at one of the companies where I was working. And a CIO was the chief information officer. And been working in tech for many years at this point. I had never seen a black female CIO before. So I was just completely mesmerized. I'm like fangirling, like, oh my gosh, this is a black woman running our organization. And at that time, one of the projects that I was working on as a project manager required me to meet with the CIO on I think it was a quarterly basis to get their approval and sign off for this project to go live. So in my mind, I'm kind of preparing myself to get the courage to ask this woman for an informational interview, not knowing how she was going to receive it. So naturally, I'm prepared for the meeting with all my, meeting documents, and I'm going through everything. And in the middle of me going through my presentation for her, she pauses and she asked me, "What are your plans?" And I knew she wasn't talking about the project at that point. I knew she was asking about what are my professional plans. And so I used that as my opportunity to say, I'm so glad you asked me that, because I was going to see if you would be open to having an informational interview conversation with me, because I would love to learn more about your background. And that's been the start of an amazing mentoring relationship. I'm still in touch with this woman today.
That's amazing. You know, I had just made a post. I said, when it's for you, when it's your time, it's your
Mm,
time.
Yeah,
Right? It's
yeah,
your time. Nothing's gonna hold that back except you, maybe.
absolutely.
Right? Maybe you might hold it back.
Yeah, yeah.
But so nice to see at the time that was needed, right? And unfortunately, when you say, I didn't have mentors, yeah, that's something that most of all of us could probably say.
Yeah.
It took a long time before I got a mentor,
Yeah.
right? I don't think that I had a mentor officially in my career the first 3 years,
Mhm.
but there was somebody, and I still identify that to him. Um, it- he didn't let me go all the way, right? He didn't come in all the way, but he never let me go all the way. If he saw me doing something that probably wasn't conducive to a great career, he would say, "Hey, shipmate, let me talk to you real quick." Right? And so I that was my first version of mentorship. It was very touch and go,
Mhm.
not really committed. Um, and it wasn't until about 6 years later that I wasn't really assigned someone that, hey, this is your mentor, right? So
Mhm.
it was a long time before I ever saw a mentor in my community. But I bring that up, and we're talking about it because you can't forget that. You can't forget that you didn't have that.
Yeah.
So for you to be in a position today, whoever is listening, and you might be from the BIPOC community, if you're in a position today and you are not a mentor to somebody, I'm going to say this: shame on you. Shame on you, because there was plenty of us that come through year
Mhm.
after year without a mentor. And you're in a position right now to change somebody's life. And so if
Yeah.
you're not mentoring somebody, you need to consider that real quick, because there are a lot of folks that need that and won't have it. And we have the opportunity to do that. So sorry about that. That was I just had to say it. So as we're talking about mentorship, there's also this part of career advancement that requires networking. How
Yes.
did you take advantage of the networking availability in your community? Because mentoring is one thing, networking
Mhm.
is another.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I'll be completely honest. I was not the best networker, or I don't think I did network very early in my career. I think I was too focused on trying to escape some of those crazy situations where I was working. So I wasn't focused on networking at all. But now I'm a huge networker, and that's one of the skills that I always share with my mentees. It's really about who you know, not necessarily what you know. So now I'm very intentional about my networking, and networking is not as simple as, okay, I'm just going to connect with 10 people on LinkedIn. That if you're sending connection requests to someone on LinkedIn, that's not true networking. Networking is actually building and nurturing the relationship. So it starts with sending that connection request, but you have to take it a step further, take it offline. Have a virtual coffee with that person, or an informational interview, or if you're local, meet in person to get to know that person on a personal level, because people do business with people they like, know, and trust. And they're not going to have the opportunity to like, know, and trust you if you aren't interacting and engaging with you. And the mentor that I spoke about, we maintained our relationship over the years, and she ultimately became a sponsor for me. The leadership program that I mentioned earlier, that I participated in back in 2018, she wrote my letter of recommendation for that program. And when I found out that I was accepted into that program, and I was not going to get funding from my manager to support that program, she reached out to the chief operating officer of my company and asked the COO of my company to fund my participation in that leadership program. So she evolved from being a mentor to essentially being a sponsor for me, and opened up a huge door in my career.
I absolutely love that. Folks, if you're a mentor, know when you need to become a sponsor, because it's two different things, right? It
Mhm.
is. And so now let's talk about sponsors, because that was a bold move,
Yeah.
right? That was a bold move, one that most people won't really go to do,
Hmm.
because they're like, well, who am I? I'm telling this, but it's important to know the difference between mentorship and sponsorship. Now, had that person, and now I'll tell you this, I may have not had many mentors, but I definitely had some sponsors
Hmm.
throughout my career that in the nick of time threw their hat on, threw their whatever
Hmm.
on the table and said, "We're gonna get this to happen." And
Okay.
so she did that for you. You were able to take advantage of that. But I wonder how many people have never seen a sponsor pop up, right?
And that was
Uh,
my first time. That was what, 2018. So my career started in 1998. So to 1998 to 2018, I never experienced that. I only read about it or heard about it when I would go to events and workshops. I only heard about it. I never experienced it. So to experience that for the first time, I was just in a complete state of shock. I couldn't believe it was happening to me.
I remember feeling the same way. I remember this, and obviously most of all of my career is Navy, right? So I'm gonna reference the Navy side, but I had a fleet master chief. I love him to death. Still talk to him often, and collaborating with him even today. But he just said, "You're it. You're
Hmm.
it. Here, get in there, and you got it." And in 3 years, my last final 3 years of service, because of his sponsorship and other senior naval leader sponsorships,
Hmm.
I was awarded a medal each year
Wow.
for activities that they put me in.
Wow.
I promise you, at one time I was like, what am I doing here? How did I get here?
Hmm.
Because and for all intents and purposes, I should have never been there. But these sponsors opened up doors for me
Yeah.
like I could never imagine it. I could never imagine. Now, it's the last 3 years of my career. What happened for, the last 20 something, 23,
Right,
right?
right.
But but it it was for that time. It was
Yes.
for that time. Now, did it have to wait that long? I don't know. I thought it could have showed up a little earlier, but it was for that time. But the blessing of it all is that they were there, right? They were not my immediate supervisor. They weren't even in my chain of command.
Mm.
They were not even in my community.
Mhm.
But I did have one main sponsor in my community, and again, it was at the latter part of my career. But um, that was the only time you've seen it,
Yes, that was the only time.
and that just blows my mind, right? So I wanted to ask you, have you had an opportunity to be someone's sponsor, and have you taken it?
Yeah, so let's talk about what a sponsor is. So sponsorship is different from mentorship. So a sponsor is typically a senior level leader in an organization, and what they do, they literally put their name and reputation on the line to help you advance your career. They're getting you the visibility that you need. They're your advocate to say like Enrique deserves to win this medal, or Enrique deserves to be elevated to this position, and here's why. So when leadership is in those closed door conversations, they are people saying your name behind those closed doors. So that's the role of a sponsor. And you don't necessarily have to be in a senior level position to sponsor people. If you're earlier in your career, one way you can sponsor someone is by making a referral. A lot of companies have internal job referrals. So you might know someone in your network that's looking for a job opportunity. You can refer them to the hiring manager or just refer them to the HR department. So that's one way you can indirectly sponsor someone. I I've been mentoring for years, and I guess my form of sponsorship now is through scholarships that I have at Drexel University and LaSalle University. So I award scholarships to African American students studying technology. So not only do I give them scholarships, but I also mentor them and also give them access to people in my network. So I'm helping to prepare them to start their careers in the tech industry and
I
also singing their praises as well.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. You said scholarship. I was like, what the? Hold on now. Y'all better listen up. That better y'all better listen up. And so it is so good to see you take opportunity after having that experience to do it and pay it forward now.
Yeah, yeah.
Folks, if you're listening, you haven't had an opportunity to mentor, seek an opportunity. If you haven't really been keeping an eye on your people to know who to sponsor or not, start looking around. Uh,
Mhm.
you know, it's don't give it just to give it, obviously, right? Because
Yeah.
you gotta when we talk about sponsorship, you putting your name out there.
Right, and the
Yeah,
person receiving the sponsorship has to put in the work. So that woman that called the COO, she wouldn't have done that if she didn't know me and know what I was capable of. And it
right.
goes back to networking, the fact that she was no longer at the company at the time, but we still maintained a relationship. So she knew what I was doing, she knew what I was involved in. And I remember when I reached out to her, she said, I know that you will benefit from this program. So she believed in me.
Yeah, yeah, very important. And Shirley says uh, the timing, right? The timing. It has to
Mhm.
be. Hey, I advocated for you. In fact, yeah. Let me tell you about Shelley. Shelley, I love this sister to death. She is just a blessing to my life. Anything I do, she start pushing it out. So thank you, Shelley. Thank you for being with us today. You are a true blessing, and God bless you for that. All right, so we spoke about two important things in terms of advancing in career. So can you share some strategies to effectively navigate your career transition? It may not be in IT, it may be in others, but I
Mhm.
know that the strategy part is also sometimes held back. There's some people that know how to do it
Yeah,
and won't teach you.
yeah.
And so let's talk about strategies for advancement.
Yeah. Honestly, I think it looks different for every person. And we need to get away from the idea of the career ladder because nothing's really truly linear. It's like more like a jungle gym and, zigs and zags and detours and things of that nature. So you need to be open to pivoting. Like my career started in tech. And when I graduated from college, I had this dream or vision of being a network engineer. The job market was bad the year that I graduated. So I didn't get that network engineering job, but I still started my career in tech, but had to, I guess, like kind of take a detour in that moment, but never lost sight of what I was ultimately focusing on. So being comfortable with pivoting, you want to make sure that you have a clear roadmap for your career. A lot of companies will have you complete a personal development plan where you kind of outline the skills and experiences or roles that you're interested in. So these are conversations that you should be having and reviewing with your manager on a regular basis. Maybe it's once a quarter, but this is outside of your regular one-to-one meetings with your manager. And just not being afraid to raise your hand and say like, hey, I do want to be a manager, or hey, I do want to learn more about the accounting department within our organization. So you can ask for opportunities for job shadowing where you sit with someone in that department and kind of observe their job functions.
Yeah,
And
and
again, going back to networking, it's all about, networking. One of my favorite tools for networking, I tell people all the time, is either the virtual coffee or the informational interview, like a quick 15-minute conversation where you come prepared to ask questions about their background, what skills are useful and necessary to be successful within that particular career field. And if you are interviewing for opportunities, you definitely want to make sure that you're having an informational interview with the hiring manager or someone from that team, because it gives you an opportunity to glean insight that you can leverage for your actual job interview. They can give you little nuggets to help you prepare for the job interview so you have a better opportunity to shine and stand out.
And you mentioned, you're right. All of those are great. Uh, Folks, look at your industry. Look at what the standards are for progression. Most industries, like in the military, we have those already structured.
Yeah.
You can find those readily as to what is the expected trajectory for a person going this way, and use those as a backdrop of a backbone to your strategy. But everything is different, right? So the way I did it when I was in may not be the same way
Mhm.
that it is received today, right? So you have to be a little more creative as you go through and transcend the decades of experience. But if you have someone that's at the top of the rung, in the middle of the rung, and at the bottom as a guide to help you navigate that, it'll make your journey a little easier, and you can, trek that journey with a whole lot more success than someone that didn't, right?
Mhm.
Get you some mentors, get you some sponsors, right? Now, sponsors take a while because they have to see you in action. They have
Right.
to be
Yeah.
sure that you are able to, like you said, Angela, able to meet the demands of this that they are putting their name for, right? So
Because they don't want to be embarrassed.
yeah,
It's their
yeah,
reputation on the line. No one wants to look bad. So they need to know that you were going to deliver. So also you have to make sure you're putting in the work and being visible. So oftentimes our managers will have those, special projects that they don't have the capacity to support. That's a perfect opportunity for someone to raise their hand and get that visibility, because most likely it's going to be a cross-functional project. So you're going to get exposure to not only your area, but another area within the company, along with other leaders in the company. So if you deliver well on that project, you're getting that visibility. So again, when those closed door discussions are being had, your name can be elevated in those discussions, and you have demonstrated what you can do.
absolutely. Thank you, Angela, for sharing your insights and experience with us today. I know there's a lot of people watching, and they are getting all of this. I hope, folks, that you've been taking notes because there has been a lot of gems shared, and I hope that you take those and are able to navigate your journey through the IT or the information technology or the STEM community at large, right? And even if the diversity and inclusion initiatives are getting shut down or revamped or whatever,
Mhm.
it is up to you to make sure that your journey is well padded with information and support. Now, I want to encourage all of you that have been viewing and been with us today to connect with Angela and explore further resources that she may be able to provide on her end. At a minimum, connect with her on LinkedIn and let her know how you felt about today's session. There's a lot of comments, Angela. I don't know if you can see those on your
Yes.
side, but a lot of comments. Thank you for all those that joined us today. But I want to leave you with this admonition, right? For those that are listening out there, you're from the BIPOC community, you're really interested in STEM or in technology, finding it hard to get into it. So to all the aspiring BIPOC community forging your way in the tech industry, you are the architects of
Yes.
innovation,
Yes.
the pioneers of change, and the catalysts for progress in the ever evolving landscape of technology. Your brilliance, resilience, and unwavering determination are the guiding lights that illuminate the way forward. Don't let that light be dimmed or shut down, because I'll tell you, as we have mentioned early, when you identify these, that gleaming light in your child's eye for
Mm.
something, for some interest, there are a lot of grown childs out there, right, that have been stomped down, right? And in a
Yeah.
world where barriers may seem insurmountable, and representation may feel scarce, right? Because that's what happened when I was representation wasn't there. Remember this: your presence is not just important; it is essential.
Mm.
You're unique. perspectives, lived experiences, and diverse voices are invaluable assets that enrich the fabric of the tech community. And we're waiting to hear from you. So don't shy away. Embrace the challenges as opportunities for growth. Let your passion fuel your journey.
Yes.
We spoke about passion early on. It fueled the journey for Angela. It could fuel it for you. You belong in the room at every table and in every conversation. Now, you have to do your part to be there and stay there and actually contribute. But be assured, you can stand tall in your authenticity, knowing that you bring something extraordinary to the table simply by being yourself. Seek these mentors out who can uplift you and support you. Be a beacon of guidance for those that will follow you, right? It's always good to get, but when it's time to give, you got to be willing to do that as well. And forge meaningful connections, build networks, and remember that your community is your strength. God bless you all. Angela, thank you for sharing your time with us. It has been great to have you. Aloha Friday, folks. It's always enjoyable because of our guests. And I just want to leave you with a couple of things as we go through the close of this session of Aloha Friday Live. We are seeking our 700 subscriber. We're about 80 short, but 80 is nothing compared to what we have out there as a community. So if you would love to join us, please subscribe. If you can go to youtube.com/@DTLW podcast, you can subscribe right there. And we would love for you to join our list as it grows. But also, when we get to this milestone of 700, we give out an author signed book, a leadership focused book. And that's always our joy to do so. And we're also streaming live on paradedeck.com. Follow me by going at the address on the bottom of the screen. 731 is my code. You can get in there and follow us every time that we stream live. But today has been all about Angela. Thank you for joining us today. I wish you nothing but success, and I know that you will continue to give to a community that's open doors for you. So thank you.
Thank you, Enrique.
Aloha Friday, everybody. God bless. We'll see you next week as we bring in another guest to talk about leadership from a different perspective. Bye-bye now.